what you said, and I disagree with almost every single point you said. I think all of these are wrong.
Okay.
So one, you said women come to the table with more emotions. They might come to the table with more emotions, but that doesn't mean they have more emotions. Men have plenty of emotions that they have that they just don't know how to process and they don't know how to work through. If I had to guess, it's probably because from a very early age, men aren't really taught properly to deal with their emotions because we tend to externalize things. When boys get mad, they want to like punch and hit things, and parents will say, no, don't do that. So you're kind of taught to repress from an early age, whereas women tend to express things more.
Women
talking.
hit
Hold on, wait,
mad.
hold on. You just let me.
I got you.
You just talk for a whole like 5
I
minutes.
got you. I'm giving you the thumbs up. You got it.
Okay,
you got it.
So when women express emotions as children, it tends to be through things like crying or complaining, and that's okay. So they're usually taught to process those emotions healthier, right? I think men tend to carry more of this like fucked up baggage, repression, and shit with them through life. I think this is why men comprise like 80% of suicides versus women. Right. I think it's because men have a lot of emotional problems that they can't process. When you say women are more emotionally volatile, I hear this claim over and over and over again. Women are more emotional. Women are emotional. Why? Oh, because they cry more. For some reason, anger is never viewed as like an actual emotion by any of the red pill community. When we say women are more emotionally volatile, do they cry more? Yeah, sure. But like guys will bump into each other at the club, scuff their shoes, and then somebody's dead like 5 seconds later, right? Like how many, like when you're hearing about things like domestic violence, like who's causing more of the damage? It's men. When you're looking at things like violent crime, like 98% are men, right? So when we talk about like who's more emotional, like, yeah, women might be more sad or they cry or they do things, you know, some of the times. But I would argue that that sort of emotional expression is way healthier than guys that fucking kill themselves over stupid shit. But if I were to look up like deaths of women and I were to see the percentage of like men versus women that kill women, do you think of all the women that have died, do you think it's mostly women killing women or do you think it's mostly men killing women? Or do you think it's about 50-50?
No, I think it would be 50-50. We recently were talking about that, and somebody did bring up some data that I don't have in front of me. But when it comes to killing, yes, men kill more than women. That is an issue. That is a problem. So I don't know what larger point that you're trying to make there. I don't know what larger point you're trying to make there. But no, I'm willing to say, even without looking at the data, that they're on the far end of the spectrum of the bell curve. There's a bunch of psychopathic, murderous men who kill more. I'm willing to say that, and that doesn't negate any point that I'm trying to make. Because when you talked about violence in a relationship, the data on this goes as simple as this: the majority of relationships are nonviolent. 84% of them are nonviolent. Only 16% of them there's violent. When it comes to those violent relationships, 58% of it is bidirectional. That means two people are being violent towards each other. When and 42% of it is unidirectional. That means one person is being violent. So when you look at the unidirectional relationships of which there is violence, the relationships where there's unidirectional violence, meaning one person being violent, 66% of that, 2/3, is perpetrated by women. So you can look at the data right there and see that in relationships, women are more violent towards men. So I will say that and circle it all the way back to your previous statement that they're better at keeping their emotions under control because they've been taught to do that from the start early on in their life. When they cry and they get patted on the head, oh, that's okay. It's okay to cry. Apparently that still doesn't matter, because even when they get in relationships with men, when it comes to unidirectional violence, they're more violent than men in these relationships. So that debunks your initial claim that they got their emotions more in check.
So I don't think having your emotions more in check is a direct line to of all the people that get physically abused in a relationship, who's more likely to do some of the physical abuse? Because the first question would be, well, how many relationships are physically abusive? Because if all the relationships, if like 5% are physically abusive, of those 5% of the women and then that 5% that abuse their partners, does that mean that all women now have less emotional control than men? I don't think that's like a non sequitur data.
Say that again.
Sure. Say that again. So you're trying to take the minority of relationships that involve physical abuse, and you're trying to say that since women are more physically abusive in the minority of relationships that have physical abuse, therefore we can say that all women are not more emotionally mature than men. That doesn't logically follow.
No, I don't get what you're saying right there, because clearly the example that I use the relationships of which there's violence. If women are more violent,
it might be.
All right, hold on. I see what you're doing, and yeah, I don't think you realize that you kind of debunked one of your previous points, because you used the men that are on the violent spectrum or on the killing spectrum and said, men are more this or men are more that. When I did the same thing and I showed data for it, then you wanted to step back and use a broader lens and exclude those. You're bending over backwards to try to take women being more violent than men in relationships off the table. if they're more violent than men in relationships, I think it stands to reason that they're more argumentative, combative, bitchy, and cussing the other one out. I just think that's not a far reach to say that the group of people that are more violent in relationships are also the people that are that are the most argumentative and causing the most problems. I don't think that's a far reach. So why would you try to exclude the violence and say, let's look over here at this, let's take it to an immeasurable, unquantifiable place so I could just advocate for women. That's what you really just did.
Yeah, okay, so I'm not trying to advocate for women here. I don't care about advocating for women. So backing up, originally we had the question of the reason why this got brought up was who is more emotional, right? And I'm trying to think of like, well, what are ways that I can measure who is more emotional? Well, I think that anger is a type of emotion. So if I look at like homicide rates, like broadly speaking, I can see that things like men commit way more violent crime than women, right? A lot of these are like crimes of passion or things you could argue are like stemming from some kind of emotionality, right? I don't know if like a hyper rational person commits violent crime. That was one example. Another example.
We were talking about interpersonal relationships and social dynamics between men and women. So,
well, hold on. No, I was broadly speaking. Where this point came up from initially was I was just broadly speaking in response to the idea that women are more emotional than men. And then I gave the example of from childbirth. I think men are kind of taught to repress because it comes out in physical ways, and women are taught generally more to process. And so I think that's why for men it comes out in more toxic ways. So, for instance, men are way more likely to commit crimes. Men are way more likely to kill themselves. These were just a few of the examples I gave. Now, if you want to challenge me within relationship dynamics, when there's physical abuse, women are more likely to strike the other partner. Now, they don't do as much damage as men, because even if you got a chart showing how much women abuse men, if we look at a chart to see who ends up in the hospital more or where severe damage is done, that's like 95% favoring men over women. Not to excuse the women that hit their partners. That's not okay either. But if you want to talk about within abusive relationships,
we're taking it point by point. Sure. I don't have the data on that, but even if I'm trusting your data, and I know this, and I've talked to countless number of men, I know that's not empirical data, but men men tend to walk it off. Men typically not going to go in the hospital, basically, holding their swollen eye. Men typically aren't going to do that. However, I will grant you a point in the sense that men are in position, just in terms of just pure muscle mass, they can cause more violence. The reason that they can cause more damage. I definitely will grant that. But the reason that I even brought that up to begin with is that you try to let women off the hook as not being these emotional train wrecks. If they're hitting more, they're being emotional train wrecks. And also, it's very much worth pointing out, and it was a video that just went viral, and viral videos are not empirical data, but it's just a good shining example that's fresh on everybody's mind. Bowling balls are heavy. Household objects and appliances are heavy. So a woman just knocked the guy out with a bowling ball, if that video was real. So yes, somebody that you're around the house with, that you live with, that you sleep around, you go to sleep for 8 hours around her, she can do damage to you. So I don't.
Sure, hey, I understand this. But
okay, hey, if you like what you saw here today and you want to see more, click the link right here to this video. This is the full video. You can see the full debate between me and Destiny and so much more in that show. So go ahead and click on that link right there. Bare minimum, if you're here and you're not subscribed, by all means, subscribe, hit the like button, bang the bell, all that good stuff. You know what to do. Thank you. And with that said, we are out of here. Peace. We go.